Hey everybody, it's Keegan here. I'm back with another video for you guys. So yesterday I did a video on the top 10 best movies of 2024, which if you want to check that video out, I'll leave a link to that in the description and in the end cards at the end of the video so you can watch it later. Well, since I did that video, I might as well take a look at my top 10 worst movies of 2024. Now, I've seen a lot of great movies in 2024. And with the amount of good movies I've seen in 2024, I've seen a lot of bad movies in 2024. And believe me, I've seen a lot of bad movies in 2024. Now, before we get started, here are a few rules for this list. First and foremost, this is my list, and some of you might agree with me on these, some of you might disagree. So if you disagree, then so be it. But again, this is my list. Another thing is, I haven't seen every single movie in 2024, so there's going to be a couple movies that are not on this list. The reason I say this, you're not going to see Madam Web on this list, because I see a lot of people on YouTube put this movie on their list at number 1, or somewhere on their worst movies list, but you're not going to see that movie on my list, because, come on people, I don't have time to torture myself with that shit. But even if I did, it would be higher on the list. But again, it's not on my list. So, oh, and one more thing. Not all of these movies on this list are ones that I've reviewed. Some of them have been reviewed on my channel. Others have not. So I feel I should point that out before we get started. But anyways, that's all I gotta say. So let's not waste any more time and let's get right into it.
Number 10.
Starting off this list at number 10, we have Megalopolis. I gotta be honest with you guys, this was the movie I was most anticipated for throughout last year, and it was the movie I was the most anticipated for. And when the reviews of the movie, when the film debuted in, I can't remember if it was at Cannes or Venice Film Festival when it first premiered, it got a lot of mixed reactions, and I'm like, this must be a really divisive one. Because there was a lot of very divisive movies that came out last year, like Kinds of Kindness, I Saw the TV Glow, and so on. And when the movie finally came out, I was seeing a lot of mixed reactions, mostly negative reactions from people on Instagram and stuff, and I'm like, that might not be good. But I still had my hopes up. And when I finally saw the movie in theaters, I left the theater feeling very disappointed with this movie. Like, I had such high hopes for it, but unfortunately, this movie was ultimately a letdown. But I do have to give the film a bit of respect, because this was a film that Francis Ford Coppola was trying to make since the 80s or something. But, I can understand the amount of setbacks Coppola had trying to make the film. Like, he was going to originally make the film in 2001 before 9/11 happened, and then he abandoned that idea. And then he abandoned the project in 2008 and didn't get back to it until 2019, which I do have to give him a little bit of credit. It took him decades to finally get this film made, which I do have to give him a little respect for that. But for the movie itself, I was really disappointed with it. Like, the story was really confusing and all over the place. Like, there was too many side plots. Some of the side plots didn't really matter to the story, honestly. And a lot of the dialogue feels like it was written from the first draft and was carried over to the final draft. Like, I mean, a lot of the dialogue could have used some rewrites and really could have been improved. And on top of that, the visual effects looked kind of ugly. The CGI looked noticeably bad. And the way the movie was shot felt like it was something for like a fragrance commercial by like Hugo Boss or something. I don't know. But the reason I have this one at number 10 is I consider this movie to being the most disappointing movie of 2024. I mean, I really, really wanted to like this movie, but in the end, I was very disappointed with it, and it could have been so much better. But in the end, it was a big letdown, and that's why I put this one at number 10.
Number 9.
Coming in at number 9 is Argyle. Now, honestly, I gotta be frank with you. I didn't hate this movie as much as most people did, so that's why I have this one lower on the list. I remember going to see it in theaters on its opening weekend, like the day after it came out, and I thought it was a little bit entertaining with the action sequences, not much else. But don't get me wrong, the movie is still not very good, and it's still on my list at number 9. The biggest problems with this movie probably has to do with the storyline and the pacing and the humor. The humor for this movie ultimately falls flat. I don't remember laughing very often when I saw the movie. I think I might have chuckled a few times, but that was it. But honestly, the humor in this movie really falls flat. The storyline in this movie is really confusing. It doesn't make sense. Like, by the time you get to the plot twist around halfway through the second act, I remember thinking, like, what the hell is even going on here? This shit doesn't make sense. And the pacing for this movie, it drags on for way too long than it should be. Like, the movie is 2 hours and 19 minutes, but it feels like it goes on for 20 or 30 minutes longer than that. But it's not the worst movie I've seen in 2024, but it is on my list. I mean, I did find it a little bit entertaining, but that's not really a compliment. Matthew Vaughn is a good director, but this is definitely one of his weaker films at best. Probably the weakest one of his that I've seen, well, at the time of me recording this video. But again, I found it a little bit entertaining for the action, and only the action, and not much else, to say the least.
Number 8.
At number 8, we have Miller's Girl. I'm not going to talk about this one for long because we got others to talk about here, but we'll get through this one pretty quickly. This is the movie where it stars Jenna Ortega and Martin Freeman. Martin Freeman plays like a high school teacher or something, and Jenna Ortega plays like a high school student who's trying to get revenge on the teacher for, I guess she's accusing him of making advances towards her or something. I really don't remember. The story, well, this movie in general is so forgettable. I literally watched it a couple weeks ago, and I literally cannot remember a single thing about this movie. But the only thing I really remember about this movie is that the dialogue is pretty poorly written, and I found the dialogue very laughable at times. Like, the dialogue, like, it's not always a good sign where a movie is so forgettable and bad. The only thing you remember is the poorly written dialogue. And that's the case for this movie, and that's why I'm having this one at number 8. It's so bad, you'll probably forget about it in under 24 hours once you watch it. Trust me, I don't even remember what even the hell happened at the end of it.
Number 7.
Coming in at number 7 is Trap, an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Now, I don't hate M. Night Shyamalan. I like a lot of his early movies. I liked The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Signs, and I also thought Split was pretty good too. But every so often, M. Night Shyamalan puts out a bad movie and a bad movie after another. And unfortunately, these last couple years, he's been putting out one bad movie after another. Glass sucked. Old was bad, but it was entertainingly, hilariously bad. And this one just was another example of M. Night Shyamalan making a bad movie. And honestly, I didn't really have any expectations for this one. And considering the first fucking trailer literally reveals the twist that Josh Hartnett, the actor who plays the main character in this movie, like, the main character is the serial killer the police are after, and why they have the concert locked down as a trap to catch him. But, like, literally the first fucking trailer pretty much gives away the twist. And, like, the whole movie, like, the police hunting down a serial killer in a concert, like some sort of like Taylor Swift like concert, was just, it's just ridiculous. And I honestly found it hard to take this movie seriously because of how badly written the dialogue was written in this movie. Like, the dialogue is so bad. Like, it's hard to take any of the characters seriously, and it feels so unrealistic and unnatural. And a couple times when I was watching this movie in the theaters, I was thinking to myself, who the fuck talks like this in real life? But it's a bad movie, but it's not M. Night Shyamalan's worst movie. I would say The Last Airbender is still Shyamalan's worst movie to this day. And I honestly thought this movie was so bad it was entertaining too, so I consider this one sort of a guilty pleasure. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a bad movie, and like literally the twist was just really stupid and ridiculous. And I remember when I saw this in the theater, there were a couple people laughing at the movie. I don't know if anybody was really taking the movie seriously. Like, it's bad, but it's definitely one of the most entertainingly bad movies I've seen throughout 2024. But it's not the worst film that M. Night Shyamalan's did. Not by a long shot, but it's still not very good at all.
Number 6.
Coming in at number 6 is Oh Canada. I was actually kind of looking forward to this movie, mostly because the story centered around an American who was running away to Canada to avoid the draft during the war in Vietnam, because back in the 60s and 70s during the Vietnam War, there was a lot of Americans who ran away to Canada to protest the Vietnam War and not go to the war when their name was drafted. And that part I find interesting during that era of the Vietnam War. And when I found out there was a film with that premise being made, and it having Richard Gere, Jacob Elordi, or I don't know how you pronounce his last name, and it even had Uma Thurman in the film, and Michael Imperioli, the guy who played Christopher in The Sopranos. It sounded interesting. And when I finally saw the film, I was very disappointed with this movie. I really wanted to give the film a chance, and I really wanted to like it, but I really didn't like this movie at all. The story was a mess, and it was confusing, and the dialogue was poorly written. Like, none of the dialogue feels very natural, and it was just like, who the hell wrote this? And it feels like the dialogue was feels like something out of an unfinished first draft or something, but like, that's how bad the dialogue in this movie is. I mean, the movie had some good cinematography and it had a pretty good cast, but unfortunately it wasn't enough for this movie to being a disaster. Like, it could have been so much better than this, but unfortunately it was ultimately a letdown. Maybe one day we'll see a better movie about an American who runs away to Canada during the Vietnam War. Maybe we'll see a better movie like that, but until then, we're stuck with Oh Canada.
Number 5.
Coming in at number 5, we have Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scar Giver. I honestly don't remember ever watching this movie because the movie is that forgettable. But if you watch the top 10 least favorite movies of 2023 video that I did last year, then you know that I put the first movie at number 5 on that list. And here we are with this list, and we have Part 2 at number 5. I really don't remember much about this movie, so we'll get through this one really quickly. The movie is just bland, it's forgettable, the story isn't very interesting. Well, if you could even count there's a story, because I honestly don't even remember what the story was even about. The characters aren't very well developed and are very forgettable and are just bland. The action sequences are meh. And they just rely heavily on the slow motion shots, which is exactly what Zack Snyder is known for. And all in all, this movie is just bland, just a bland, generic science fiction movie that is just very forgettable. I know there's a director's cut version for both Rebel Moon Part 1 and Part 2, but fuck that. I'm not going to bother with that shit. I'm not going to waste 3 hours of my life watching Part 1 and Part 2, like an extended version of those movies. Even if they do somehow improve over the first and second movie and get an R rating, I'm not going to bother with it. End of story.
Number 4.
At number 4, we have the Crow remake, which is the only remake that's on this list. I originally had this one placed at number 3, but then I bumped it down to number 4. Don't get me wrong, it's a terrible remake that never should have been made, but it didn't really piss me off as much as the next 3 movies on this list, which we will get to shortly. I honestly don't know why would anybody want to remake the original 1994 film of the same name. Like, the original movie had a great soundtrack, had some good action. I really liked the overall tone and style of the film. And not to mention, it was Brandon Lee's final film before he was accidentally killed on set from an accident that occurred on set before the film was released and finished. But remaking a movie like that, best known for a tragedy that occurred in production of the film, really doesn't sit well with me, in all honesty. And I really wasn't looking forward to it when I saw the first pictures of the film that were released before the trailer. Like, the character design is like, what the hell is this? It's like a goth redneck or something. But I decided to check the movie out, to just give it a chance. And I really did give this movie a chance, but I did not like this movie at all. I mean, Bill Skarsgård was all right in the movie. I mean, no disrespect to him. At least he was in Nosferatu, which was a better remake to come out last year. But I found this movie to be rather bland, boring, and very forgettable. I mean, the action sequences weren't bad. I mean, some of the kills were pretty good, and it was a lot more bloody than the original movie. But don't get me wrong, the movie was still not very good. I thought it was bland, boring, forgettable, and it's just a pointless remake that actually nobody really asked for, but then somebody decided that the original movie needed a remake, and it did. Your best bet is to just avoid watching this movie at all costs and just watch the original. Trust me, the original movie is so much better than this. But now we've got that out of the way, we are now going to be getting into the 3 movies that really pissed me off.
Number 3.
Coming in at number 3 is Joker Folie à Deux, or Merci de Merde, because this movie was a piece of shit. Now, I really enjoyed the first Joker movie for what it was. It wasn't no masterpiece or anything, but I really enjoyed it. I liked the tone, the style, and I really liked Joaquin Phoenix's performance in that film. And I personally don't think it needed a sequel. I think we could all agree that the first Joker movie did not need a sequel. And I think we can all remember that Todd Phillips once said he wasn't going to do a sequel to it, until one day Warner Brothers decided to pay him to do a sequel, and like that, we got a sequel, and man, it did not work at all. In fact, I thought this movie was terrible. And like, the movie is like 2 hours and 18 or 19 minutes long, and almost nothing really happens in it. It's like, most of the movie is a courthouse drama, and the other half is just a musical, which the musical notes in this movie were really unnecessary, and I honestly don't know why this movie needed to become a musical. I guess they wanted to try something different, putting musical notes in this movie, which really drag on and add nothing to the story, especially considering the first movie was not at all a musical. So I honestly don't get why they made a musical out of this movie, but okay, I guess. Lady Gaga was all right as Harley Quinn, but she kind of needed more screen time, in my opinion. But she was just there in the movie, I guess. And Joaquin Phoenix did a good job as the character. It's just too bad it was just his talent was wasted on this piece of shit of a sequel that never should have been made. Like, the first movie was fine as it is. I don't know why the hell we even got a sequel. Like, the sequel was really unnecessary. But in the end, this movie was just a terrible excuse of a sequel. And like, I was tempted to walk out when I saw it in the theaters, because I was like, there's really no point. But I stayed to the end, and yep, that was just 2 hours of my life I'm never getting back in this piece of shit sequel. Just stick with the first movie. Don't even bother with this one. It's terrible.
Number 2.
Number 2. Somehow not at number 1, but one step behind from being number 1. Borderlands. Now, right off the bat, I just want to say I couldn't really get into the Borderlands video games. I don't know. I just couldn't really get into them. So I had no expectations for this movie to be good or not. And I'm not even a fan of the game, so there's that. But I saw the film in theaters anyways. I think it was on the day it came out. I don't remember, nor does it even matter anyways. But I saw the movie in theaters anyways. And oh my god, this movie was a fucking embarrassment. Like, this movie was terrible. And it was absolute torture to sit through. Like, there were many times when I saw this movie in the theaters, I almost walked out, but I didn't. I somehow sat all the way through to the end, which really says a lot given how much of a dumpster fire this movie is. There's so much wrong with this movie, from the casting choices, from the reshoots, which you definitely can notice the amount of reshoots that went into this movie because Eli Roth was busy working on Thanksgiving, and they got the guy that directed the first Deadpool movie to do the reshoots. And the visuals, the CGI, all of which looked like dog shit. And the story is just so bland and generic. You probably have seen it in every other science fiction or action Band of Misfit type of movies like Guardians of the Galaxy, Suicide Squad, or shit like that. And for the casting choices, like, the casting choices feels off. Like, I don't even know if they're like their characters from the video games. Like, I know Cate Blanchett's character is a lot younger in the video games, and Cate Blanchett's like in her mid-50s, I think. I don't know. And Kevin Hart is just in this movie for, I guess he just needed a paycheck, I guess. Jamie Lee Curtis, I mean, come on. Like, you're in so much better movies than this. And Jack Black as Claptrap, oh my fucking god. He was the most annoying thing in this whole movie. Like, I mean, I think I know the character Claptrap was supposed to be annoying in the video games, but apparently in the movie he is even more insufferable in the video games, from what I've heard at least. But my god, Jack Black's performance in this movie was fucking terrible. Like, I mean, I like Jack Black, but my god, he was terrible in this movie. Like, his character was so fucking annoying. And there was one scene in the movie where it almost made me rage quit, when he's randomly shitting out nuts and bolts for, well, he's a robot, of course, but for some reason there is one continuous minute of him shitting out nuts and bolts for fucking, I don't know. And that almost made me leave the theater, because that just, it made me cringe so hard. I'm like, fuck. But I was lucky to make it to the end of this piece of shit movie. But in the end, this movie was horrible. Do not watch it under any circumstances, not even if you're drunk, high, or anything. Just do not watch it. Simple. But how is this not at number 1, you might ask? Well, we'll get to that in a moment. Okay, before we get to number 1, here's a quick rundown of movies that didn't quite make the list, but are still worth mentioning anyways. And we only got 5 movies on my dishonorable mentions list. So the first movie on my dishonorable mentions list is A Quiet Place Day 1. I didn't hate this movie as much as the other movies on this list. I wouldn't say it's horrible. I would say it's rather disappointing. I really enjoyed the first 2 Quiet Place movies, and I was intrigued of what the prequel could bring us, and telling us on what happened that led to the aliens invading Earth. But unfortunately, the movie was just rather bland, boring, and uninteresting. The characters weren't very interesting, and the characters just weren't really developed enough for me to care about them. Except for the cat. The cat was probably the best thing about the movie. Same thing with Argyle. Anyways, next up we got Baby Girl. I didn't hate this one. I thought this one was just, I just didn't really care for this one. I just thought it was bland, and I've seen far better movies like this. There were much better movies like this in the 80s or 90s, I'd say. But I would say it would be kind of unfair to put this on the list because I just thought this was meh and not really bad enough to be on my worst list like some of these movies you've seen. Next up, we got a Night Swim. Just a bland and boring horror movie with just a generic story, just jump scares and just boring. But I actually originally was going to put this one on my list, but decided to spare it and put it in my dishonorable mentions because there were worse movies I've seen, worse than that. And then we got Immaculate. I know some people like this movie, but I honestly did not care for this movie. I just thought this movie was just boring, and I just didn't really like it. But it wasn't enough for it to end up on the list. And the last one for my dishonorable mentions list before we move on to number 1 is Drive Away Dolls. I was actually really looking forward to this movie. It was supposed to come out in 2023, but because of the strike that was going on at the time, it was delayed to February. And I wanted to like this one, but unfortunately, I was really disappointed with this one. Like, it could have been so much better. Like, the movie feels kind of rushed. Some of the cameos didn't really do anything to the story. Not even Matt Damon's cameo or Pedro Pascal's cameo. They were just there in the movie, but all in all, the movie was just a very big disappointment. But I thought Megalopolis was a bigger disappointment than that. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's move on to number 1.
Number 1.
Well, here we are. Number 1, the big one, the worst movie I've seen in 2024. And no, it's not Madam Web. Like I said at the start of the video, I haven't seen that one, and I'm not in a big rush to seeing it. But what could be worse than Borderlands? Well, let me be the first to say this is a movie that was so bad, so bad that I literally could not finish it. I gave up after 40 minutes of this movie. Like, usually with some bad movies, I usually watch it all from start to finish. Hell, Borderlands would have been at number 1 if it hadn't been for this movie. But this is one of the few times where a movie was so bad, I literally couldn't finish it. Well, you all know what it is. My number 1 worst movie of 2024 is Unfrosted. Oh my god, this movie was an embarrassment. Like, I like Jerry Seinfeld and some of the members of the cast in this movie. Like, fucking Bill Burr's in this movie, for fuck's sakes. Like, he's hilarious. Like, come on, man. Like, what are you doing in this movie? But, man, like, this movie just did not work at all. Like, none of the jokes worked. Like, it was not even remotely funny at all once. Like, it was so bad, in fact, like, I literally turned it off after 40 minutes. Like, I literally couldn't take it anymore. I was tempted to fast forward it, which I did fast forward it, but I didn't watch it. So, you know what? Like, after 40 minutes, like, yeah, you know what? I can't take this anymore. So, I turned it off and I put on a much better movie. I watched Mallrats instead for the first time, because that movie was actually hilarious, unlike Unfrosted, which I know Jerry Seinfeld really tried, and everyone in the movie tried their best with this movie, but this movie was so goddamn insufferable. Like, after 40 minutes, I'm like, the hell with this, and I shut it off. So therefore, Unfrosted is the worst film of 2024. At least for me it is. So there you guys have it. Those are my top 10 worst movies of 2024. And thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like, leave a comment below. And if you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe. And comment below, what are the worst movies you've seen in 2024? Let me know in the comments below. I'd be interested in hearing your guys' thoughts on the worst movies of 2024. And if you want to check out my top 10 best movies of 2024, I'll leave a link to that in the description and on the end cards, which will be right on your screen right about now. So that's all I got to say. So thanks again for watching. Hope you all have a great day. And I'll talk to you all later. And yeah, have a great day, everybody. Peace out. Bye-bye.